I'm going to give you a quick tour of my final project. You mentioned in the feedback about a week ago that it would be good to actually incorporate something fun or something to look forward to give people something to keep working through. So I've tried to incorporate that a little bit in this just tour of the project to explain why it was done the way it was. I have no conflict of interest to declare except that I'm employed by the Department of Family Medicine as Director of Faculty Development. This project was about designing a resource for teachers, in my case medical educators, to teach digital literacies. And it's also to incorporate the different course readings, observational field notes, survey, and other literature sources. It's there to explain digital literacy tool to teachers. So you can see I've included a Powtoon that does that in about a minute and a half. To provide references throughout and use an evidence base, and to state limitations of the approach and to talk about what's next. So hopefully this presentation will cover that in about 15 minutes or so. The context is that family physicians in our department work all over Eastern Ontario and actually all over the north as well. There's nearly 500 faculty, French and English, who work in urban, suburban, rural, and remote settings. They're academic and community-based sites. Experience tells us that these physicians require short, practical messages. And so we needed some degree of online learning so that we could have access to people from all over the place, but also elements that we could use in a blended format where we give them some digital teaching, maybe even in a flipped classroom kind of approach, but they can be self-guided because not everybody's going to be interested in the same thing. This needed to be self-controlled and self-paced to give really the learners, the participants, a chance to control how the project went. They use a lot of tech in their lives already. Just talking to them, these are some of the things that people came up with, but they don't necessarily use it in their clinical lives, so it's or their teaching lives. So this is a way of helping open up new avenues for them to solve some of the challenges that they're having, and it has to be focused on their challenges. When I looked at needs assessment, I asked people in the spring what they were interested in, and there were several topics I asked them about, but a large part of them actually said they were interested in use of digital technologies in their teaching. So at the bedside as well as in academic teaching, they wanted training in how to incorporate reflection, as well as use evidence-based medicine teaching help and tips for holding an effective journal club. There were lots of other things they were interested in as well, but these are ones that relate to this project. So there's some grounds that people would actually choose a session on some of these topics. Digital literacies, of course, it's not just about skills, it's about the strategies you use and the mindsets and dispositions that you have to participate in the conversations, whether it's online or elsewhere, and to make meaning. And I think this notion of making meaning is something that we really try to push in family medicine as we encourage reflection. The challenge I have is that it's kind of like kids who don't have other English literacy skills. The reality is a lot of our faculty are faced with challenges because they don't have education theory to back them up. So what I've been trying to do too is talk about this with people over the last few weeks, and I've realized people don't like this notion of being referred to as being digitally literate, which implies that if they don't have these skills, they're illiterate. And they have a lot of pride, and so this notion of instead selling this as something that it allows people to be quick on their feet, to move from one medium to another, to solve problems quickly, and that physicians are always interested in that. How can I solve problems quickly in a way that's effective? These 6 C's are something that work for the full-in approach. I really like that because it's something that we incorporate in our requirements for residents. It's not just for young people. So the big thing about all this, and I put this up in my office at work, is this notion of a modern teacher. The big thing is that you need an attitude change. Before you worry about the technologies, you need to learn about the attitudes that you have that make you a 21st century teacher. And that's not just for primary and secondary school, this is for postgraduate as well. And I think I tried to push this notion that you don't have to be an expert to try something. Just jump in, and it's like that maker movement idea. So a strategy we used throughout to promote this was to take a framework like Bloom's and really apply it. I'll give you an example. To keep using the terms, it's a little bit like learning a language. The more I use the terms with my faculty, the more they're able to understand and appreciate the language, and they start using it themselves. So I say, like, when a medical student, it would be okay for them to remember and understand something, but as you get to higher levels, like a resident, they really should be able to evaluate, analyze, and be a lot more critical. So when I talk in the presentation about journal clubs, I talk about how, which level they're coming in at Bloom's taxonomy. So just using this is part of them developing literacies both in the technology as well as in the language of education. The community of inquiring approach is something that we use as well, and it comes up a lot. I think technology really helps us with the cognitive presence, social presence, and teaching presence. And I mentioned this in my reflection, so I don't need to go over it in great detail, but the feedback from teachers and from the literature is that there's first-order barriers which are extrinsic to teachers and relatively easy to eliminate. A lot of times this isn't the issue for physicians. They tend to have access to internet and quality devices and so on. But the second-order barriers are bigger issues for the group I'm working with. And this feeling that they really don't need to, they're quite a conservative bunch. And so this is something that I think I'm getting around by giving them lots of options and self-pacing and making it fun and attached to other activities when they're actually already going to be there for faculty development. The Institute, I won't need to go through this because I already covered it. This is what came out of the interviews and the surveys, but first order barriers and second order barriers as well, especially the second order ones are going to be the most challenging things to work on. So the final project plan really talks about professional development. And what I did throughout all of this is to use a makerspace mindset, where faculty have control and the role of the person presenting it is more to facilitate ideas. But they need to come with this notion of wanting to make or share or play, and that's going to be hard because they're not used to education sessions that are even interactive. They're very used to things like lectures. And so I right away tried to give the motto of faculty development, intellectual, and play. So they had to almost have the intellectual before the play, I found in talking about this with people. So you'll see that in the Powtoon. It's about a minute and a half Powtoon selling this. Tech times are what I'm calling this. It's a notion of a 30 or 45-minute session at the end of a faculty development half day when they're already going to be there, a blended learning approach, and you have these micro skills that are being taught in little short 3 to 6 minute lessons, and sometimes it's why would you do this, and sometimes it's how to do it. And it really needed to be pitched as authentic for the faculty. So when I look at the elements of effective faculty development programs, I'm just going to run through these quickly. This is a systematic review of hundreds of medical education faculty development interventions. Steinert at McGill put this out there. They have to be evidence-based. They have to be relevant content. They have to use experiential learning and opportunities to practice and apply. They need a chance to have feedback and reflection, so the small group approach and the dyadic learning is going to give that. They need to be based on a project, so this notion that people can work on things over time. It's not just a one-off. Needs to build a community, and so when you have people coming together in a community of practice, this is really what's happening here as well, building relationships and making a safe space for learning. It has to be longitudinal and give opportunities for reflection over time, and even just the way we ask them questions about what they've implemented at the next session will give them a chance to talk about what they've implemented, and we'll see if the program is being effective. And institutional support, which is what I have to secure now. My chair is generally supportive, and the senior leadership team has told me that they're interested in this as well. So the role of mentoring in the literature seems to be really important, and I'm just going to keep emphasizing that over and over again. Dyadic pairs will be arranged so that when somebody comes, I'm going to give them a deck of cards. They pick a card, any card, when they come in the door. If they happen to get a red card, then they'll be paired up with somebody who's a black card, and this allows some peer teaching. The Prezi approach was used here. I hope it works. I've had problems in the past with websites where you're sort of relying on the person reviewing it to just wander around and find what you're looking for. This allows you to have a paced approach, but it may not work if I hope it works well for you, but it could easily be exported into a website or into a learning management system to guide people. So I won't really necessarily go through in a lot of detail what the different scenes look like. I won't cover it here, but basically the technology skills I've taught are focused on 2 lessons. One is around using it to connect to learners. So that's a lesson on video making and screencasting, using Flipgrid and sharing videos with other people, including YouTube, Vimeo, and how to make a QR code. So there's little quick lessons on how to do that. The problem number 2 is technology and how to connect to information. So it's all about journal clubs and how technology can help you run a journal club and access free articles through the university library. So it's really little things that will hopefully be practical and give people some choice. There's a Powtoon promoting the project, so I would watch that. It's kind of fun. There's little short videos that you don't have to go through each one of them. My goal was to produce something that would be useful for the learners to have some choice. Screencasts, teaching new skills. The screencast approach was nice because I liked it because it taught, it gave a sense of teaching presence. There are several elements I keep going back to: the notion of Bloom's taxonomy, community of inquiry model, cognitive apprenticeship theory, and sociocultural learning theory are something that keep coming up as well. Modeling of this by somebody who's just a learner himself, by showing a rough cut and a more polished video, was done in the video area. And there's also additional resources, like I put a handout there because I didn't want the presentations to be too long, but I put together a handout on journal clubs, what works and what doesn't work, and how to assess if things aren't working and how to solve the problem. So it could appeal to learners in different ways, shapes, and times. A tour of the website I won't do here. Actually, I will do just one quick to show you what it looks like. So if I go to the actual why screencasting video, and hopefully this will work. It's always dangerous to do it. It's just a slide from a review article in the CMAJ. It was a pretty good article. So here's how to screencast and why it can work. Things that often come up, and so a question that often comes up is tremor and how to distinguish it. So if I was doing a presentation on this, I'm just going to put my microphone down, I can just skip out of this, and I've queued up a couple of videos. So here's a video where he's demonstrating arresting tremor of Parkinson's. Okay, and I'm just going to back it up a little titch to show what it was like when it was at rest. So that's at rest, and then when he has active movement, when he lifts his hands up, it stops. Okay, so it stops with intention. Now, I'm just going to stop this other video, go to the second one to demonstrate a pill rolling tremor. And you can see it, a classic pill rolling tremor. So if you're pointing out a physical sign to a learner, you can do that. I'm going to stop this one, and I'm going to go to the last one just to distinguish from essential tremor. And I'm just going to back it up a little here. And here's a woman who at rest is okay, but then when she goes to have action, if she's going to draw a spiral, see how she's got quite noticeable difficulty there. So now I'm going to go back to my presentation, slideshow. So you can see how you could go back and forth and introduce multimodal aspects, different types of elements to your presentations. And so that gives an example of how I tried to incorporate elements that were useful to teachers. So will this process be effective? That's an outstanding question, an issue remaining. How can we keep it fun? For example, one of the articles on teaching physicians social media says you really got to keep this fun and make sure that they keep a fun attitude. I'm not sure that just wearing silly hats is a good idea. It may be a terrible idea. But I think the notion of having a blended approach where the modules can be semi-serious and then the person presenting them in person can actually be more down to earth. And the setting is one where you have to read the participants, and if the participants aren't happy or are upset about something, you really have to just maybe tone it down and go at their pace. Is the product effective? Is the process effective? And how should it be changed? I think there are changes that are needed, but it's an iterative process, and it's kind of like a design spiral. I feel like now that we've got a few products, it's important to shop them around a little bit. So one way to do this would be to go to faculty to assess their gaps and actually have people self-rate some sense of, like with Likert scales, whether or not their role as clinicians, in their role as clinicians or at home or as medical educators, they use digital technologies and how they use them, and some open-ended questions of what they would hope to do with these new technologies. And I think once they see this in action, they'll be able to participate and give a lot more idea of what they need. But it has to be learner-centered, and this faculty development in our department is all voluntary and optional, so it has to be kind of fun and driven at their pace. In terms of outcomes, I wanted to know if this is going to be something that works, and it was really important for me to look at outcomes like Kirkpatrick levels. So reactions is important to study, like whether they're engaged and participating, whether they're satisfied and perceive the skill to be relevant. And what are some shorter term outcomes like, effects of change in attitudes or skills or confidence. So these are things that are relatively easy to apply. More medium-term outcomes would be things like whether or not they applied or attempted the skills in their workplace. Longer-term outcomes, whether there's increased sense of well-being or connection to their learners, or scholarship, such as completing a teaching dossier. So this is stuff that we could look for down the road, but in the short term, I'd like to see if some of the outcomes are being achieved. Next step is to get support from the senior leadership and do some focus groups and informal review with some sort of member checking, get some think aloud, see what works and doesn't work, add some modules, add different voices beyond the faculty development director, and really seek to get more of a sense of what people need, and both perceived and unperceived. Thank you very much, Professor Hagerman. I really have learned so much from you, how you teach, what you teach. I have such respect for you. Thank you for letting me be part of the Digital Literacies Institute, and it's such a wonderful group of people and educators, and to the people in my class, I'm very thankful. There are several references that I put together for this presentation.